Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So this is kind of a new site for my channel, and that's my first acoustic guitar. And I wouldn't say it's anything stellar, but it's just something I picked up on a whim. It's a Yamaha Eterna made in Taiwan. I'm gonna guess that's probably 1980s, something like that. It's in pretty sad shape, to be honest. I'm not gonna be able to fix all the cracks in the finish. Some of them have been there quite a while based on the discoloration that's going on inside them. But I am gonna try to clean up the finish a little bit, address this issues here with the bridge, the strings. The nut is loose and actually just completely detached. And I've got a few other small issues that I'll try to take care of along the way. And let's just see how it turns out. So first thing we're gonna do is remove the strings. Now the reason the nut is loose is both because it's a crappy plastic nut with old glue on it, and because I think the fretboard is separating from the neck at the very end. And so I'm gonna have to address that as well. All right, I'm gonna cut the bird's nest off of the headstock here, and then we'll come back once I've done a little bit of cleanup on this guitar. All right, so I got all the dust and everything cleaned up, and I actually shook about 30 years worth of picks out of the inside of the cavity of that guitar. Here's a couple of them, and I've used them to separate out the fretboard from the neck so that I can get a little bit of glue in there. Okay, so things look a little bit different now. I was injecting some glue into this crack and my camera did not work out. I'm not sure what happened there, but anyway, I've got some repaired cracks here, and I'll show you some of the tools that I used to do that injection. But this is an industrial syringe that I ended up buying. I think I got this one off Amazon, and I just put some wood glue down in it, and I got that crack opened up, put those picks in there, and then I just injected that glue down into that crack until it squeezed out the sides. Then I clamped it, and then I got the nut slot cleaned up, and then I just dropped the nut in there and put a couple drops of super glue on it. Now when you're super gluing a nut, you don't need a whole lot of glue, just maybe a drop or two on the bottom edges and maybe one on the front or something like that, and just set it in place and then clamp it. I went ahead and kind of repaired the finish over the crack itself. It's got a couple places where there was some other damage, but it's really nice. You can't feel it at all. I'll show you some still pictures of that, and we'll move on to some other parts of this guitar. All right, so one of the things that I want to fix on this guitar is that the end pin fell out in shipping this thing to me, and I don't have an end pin to go back in it. And I looked at them online, and I just don't want to pay 10 bucks for an end pin from Amazon. I've got a bunch of strap buttons on hand, and what I'm going to do is drill this out to 5/16, dowel it, and then drill it for a strap button. And I'm also going to drill the heel of the neck for a strap button as well. So I'm going to start down here, and I'm just going to enlarge this hole to 5/16, which it's very close right now. Just make sure that this fits. I could use a little bit more. Okay, that's nice and tight now, so I'm going to go ahead and glue this thing in, then we'll get it flush and I will wipe off the excess. Alright, so when we're talking about installing a strap button, it's just a matter of drilling a small pilot hole for the screw for the strap button. And I've got a couple of crusty old strap buttons that I'm going to try to install. Alright, well that fits well. Just got to do the one up by the heel. All right, next thing I'm going to deal with is cleaning up this fretboard. Now, I have actually already started, and basically what I've done is I've taken a razor blade and I've scraped off a lot of the gunk that was on here. And I really try with my razor blade to get right up next to those edges of the frets. And even now, you'll see it comes up with some stuff. It's just impossible to get it all, but I try to get the major gunk out. And then what I do is I go back with some steel wool and some oil. Now normally I use lemon oil on my better guitars, but I have started using Old English on some of these less expensive guitars, and it works pretty well. And it's actually a cleaner and a conditioner, so let's try that on this one. Now this is quadruple aught steel wool, by the way. Now you want to go with the grain if you can. Now sometimes on the higher frets, if you really want to get in there next to the fret, you've got to go against the grain and kind of along with the fret. But at least for the first few passes, I'm going to go with the grain just so I get the wood nice and conditioned and get plenty of oil on there. And on a really gunky guitar like this, I'll come back along the fretboard with a paper towel and pick up any of the excess oil, because the oil is going to start lifting some of the dirt out of the fretboard. And I can use this pass to kind of, you know, free up some of that dirt that's in there. Now this fretboard is a little bit deceptive because it's also stained, so I might be removing some of the stain by doing this. You can see the wear marks where the difference of the natural color of the wood is. There's really no way to avoid that if I want to get this gunk off. When I get to this point where I think everything's clean enough, and I'm probably not quite there yet, but just to show you, I will put a fresh coat of oil on a paper towel and then just go ahead and coat the fretboard. I don't want to saturate it, I just want to coat it, and then I'll let that sit for a little bit. And again, something this dirty, it's going to raise some of that dirt out of the grain over time, and I'll have to come back and wipe it off. And I don't want to let this sit to the point where it's like soaking the wood and actually like pushing the frets out. So, you know, I'm trying to balance out moisturizing the fretboard and oversaturating it. All right, I'm gonna do a little cleanup on this lower edge of the guitar down here where there's some black marks, and just see if I can't polish those out. I'm just using a drill and a polishing pad with a little bit of compound on it. All right, well, that's got that black mark out of the left-hand side here, and so I think that's about all I'm gonna do in terms of finish. I did already do a little bit of finish repair on the back. There was some buckle rash in this area. All I did on that was wet sanded to 600, then wet sanded to 1200, and then just did the exact same polish I just did with the drill. So there's not much really to talk about there. This guitar has so many little finish cracks and whatnot that I'm not gonna really do much on it. It's just got this kind of old school vibe to it, and the finish cracks are not like in the wood, so I'm just gonna leave it alone. It's got kind of a worn in vintage feel to it. All right, so we've got the strap buttons installed, we have the nut repaired, we have the neck repaired, we've got the fretboard conditioned, and I've done a little bit of finish cleanup on the guitar. So let's go ahead and install the strings next, and we'll do a setup on it, just kind of make sure it plays okay. The strings I'm going to be using are Ernie Ball Earthwood lights. I don't really have a particularly favorite brand of acoustic guitar strings, and I like Ernie Ball, so let's go ahead and try these out. Okay, well, these are installing okay, but I can already tell my action is a little bit high, so I think what I may do at this point is go ahead and shave a little bit off my saddle and then reinstall it. All right, well, sorry to take the break there, but I just had to adjust this action. The low E was a little bit high, and I basically took the saddle out and I shaved some material off the bottom of the saddle. I got the grooves out of the top of the saddle as well, but the majority of the material that I took out was on the bottom of this saddle, and all I used to do that is a sanding block. Just rub the saddle against it. And I was shooting for 6/64 at the 12th fret and 5/64 on the other side. So 6/64 bass side, 5/64 treble side, and that's kind of where I'm going to start with. I really don't know what my preference is for an acoustic because I don't play it that much. This right now is within spec, and I've got the high E string installed as well, obviously, but I'm going to go ahead and install the rest of the strings and see where things land with full string tension on it, and then I'll adjust the truss rod and get the neck relief where I want it. All right, well, the strings are working out great and the action is just where I set it. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and look up neck relief next. I really never set neck relief on an acoustic before, so I've got to look up the spec and we'll see if I'm close. So when I say that I'm not familiar with neck relief on an acoustic, what I mean is on an electric, you fret the guitar at the 1st fret and you fret the guitar at the 17th fret and you measure somewhere around the 8th fret. That 17th fret on an electric is normally around the neck to the body joint, and the neck to the body joint on an acoustic is more around the 14th fret. So I wasn't sure where to start with down here at the high end. And not only that, but the heel of the neck kind of extends all the way out to the 13th and maybe the 12th fret. So I was not sure how to measure this exactly. And it turns out, at least the spec that I found online, says to fret the guitar at the 1st fret and at the 12th fret. So you measure at the 6th fret, and that's different, way different than an electric guitar. So anyway, I'm measuring at the 6th fret and I'm looking for between 8 and 10 thousandths of relief. And so I've got my 8 and my 10 thousandths relief here, and it looks like I don't quite have 10 because there's a lot of resistance pushing that 10 thousandths feeler gauge in. But when I switch to the 8 is good. So I think I'm within spec on the neck relief. I feel like I'm close enough and I've got the action right. I can pretty much call this thing done. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me on this episode. You know, it's my first acoustic guitar episode. And by the way, thank you guys for 1,000 subscriptions. I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the likes, all the comments, and I hope to see you guys next time.